I'm delighted to say joining us on the We Are West Ham podcast for the very first time is Stel from This Is Mappa Cypriot football podcast. Stel, great to have you with us on the show. One of the most exciting things for me about last season's run to the Europa League semi-finals, linking up with fans of teams from other countries all across Europe, of course, and it's great to have that off and underway again for the knockout stages of the Europa Conference League. Larnaca at the moment, it's Thursday night at the top of the Cypriot First Division as it stands. I think you all have probably experienced this. No doubt there's already among West Ham fans some sort of assumptions, I think, because they might not know too much about Cypriot football, that, it should be a breeze and we should be through to the next round, no problem. I guess obviously there's going to be a gulf in quality, but I think it's more just ignorance often with things like that. What can you tell us? What can West Ham fans expect from Larnaca sort of on the pitch, first of all?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on. Really appreciate it, mate.
Pleasure.
So, yeah, look, at the end of the day, with Cypriot football, it's the most dysfunctional league I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Look, just give you a bit of background on many of the clubs. A lot of them are very political. They're either linked with a political party or they have investors from abroad. We've got a couple of clubs that are owned by Russians. So a lot of money's come into the league, a lot of big names for the league anyway. The quality isn't as great as what I think it should be, but it's getting better. Having spoken to an analyst of a club there, he said that their standard is practically championship mid-table or a little bit lower. So that's the level that you're probably going to get. But we're seeing an influx of a lot of foreign players coming in, big names as well, that obviously you'd think wouldn't go to Cyprus. Some people like Matt Derbyshire, for example, who played for Blackburn Rovers, was playing for my team, Omonia. He actually had the spell at AEK Larnaca. And over the years, we've had players like John Arnorisa in Cyprus. We've had Zaelias, big name players that you wouldn't expect, but it was the tail end of their careers. But the league is changing. It's changing a lot. We've got very decent academies out there. And as I said, with the foreign money coming in, it's only boosting the clubs. And AEK are one of the clubs that have benefited from, I wouldn't say foreign investment because they still have a Cypriot president, but a foreign influence, so to speak.
Right, fair enough. Yeah, because I think lots of fans who you'll forgive me for not being aware of this. The Larnaca in the Greek part of Cypriot, the Cypriot football division, does that just cover that part of the
only covers the south. Yeah, only covers the south. Yeah.
So every team. Right. Okay. So I see. As far as the quality goes, and you mentioned championship mid-table, to get to the stage of the competition Larnaca have got to is an impressive feat. For understandably, what are the sort of previous European achievements of where does it rank getting to the last 16 of the Conference League?
What we need to bear in mind is that AEK are effectively a new club. They were formed in 1994, and it happens quite a lot in Cyprus where two teams will merge into one,
right?
Either due to politics or clubs going bankrupt, whatever. So AEK were founded in 1994. They actually got to, I think the second round of the Winners' Cup in 97. They lost 2-0 to Barcelona. Ronaldo and Prosinecki scored in the first leg. But they're still a fairly new team. They've only won 2 cups. They've never won a league title. When you look at Cypriot football, you think of Apoel, the team that famously got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. My team, Omonia, Anorthosis were the first Cypriot team. So AEK, they're fairly new, but realistically, they're the only team in Larnaca. While there are 2 other teams, they're known as refugee clubs because they came from the north, but AEK are Larnaca through and through.
Right.
So in terms of a European adventure, this is probably their most successful. But just to give you a bit of a backstory, it's a long one, but I'll try and simplify it as much as I can. Basically, AEK finished second last season. And so last season was the first year 2 teams in Cyprus could qualify for the Champions League.
Right.
And AEK came second. So they went through the qualifiers. I think they lost to Midtjylland on penalties in the Champions League qualifiers, which meant they slipped into the Europa League qualifiers. They knocked out Dnipro and they also knocked out Partizan Belgrade to get them through to the Europa League. And they played Rennes, Dinamo Kiev, and Fenerbahce. That's right.
Right.
And they slipped into the Conference League by finishing third, and then they played Dnipro again in the last round and knocked them out. So it's been a long, arduous season for them. It's been very physically demanding. But to be fair, mate, the squad of players that they have, a lot of these players have played top-level football in La Liga, in Serie A. So I wouldn't say they're, what's the word that they use? Farmers, that's a derogatory term. They're not. These players have played for their national teams. They've played in big leagues abroad, so they know about the standards. But do they have the physicality and the energy to cope with teams such as West Ham? That is the question I'm a little bit funny about, to be honest. I'm not sure if they can cope with it.
Yeah, fair enough. So just before we'll get into the football a little bit more in a little while, but there's fans who will be going out this week. Lots of the chat that I'd seen about fans playing the trip were quick to note its proximity to Ayia Napa. What can West Ham fans going out to Cyprus, maybe for the first time to the country, or what can they expect from the surrounding and the football ground when they're in their atmosphere and fans and that sort of thing?
Well, Larnaca is where the main airport is in Cyprus. There's two airports. There's one in Bafo and there's one in Larnaca. So Larnaca is where the main airport, the international airport is, so to speak. And Cyprus is so small, you can get to somewhere in like 20 minutes, half an hour, like the next city. Ayia Napa is half an hour away. But at this time of year, it's pretty quiet. And to be honest, Napa isn't what it used to be back in the day. It's not the house and garage scene as what I remember. It's more like going to chill, loads of old people going out there to retire. It isn't this crazy place like what it used to be. Again, the clubbing scene in Cyprus isn't what it used to be, but it's more for going to bars. Like in Larnaca, there's a strip called Finigues, right by the beach. In fact, Larnaca Marina is I don't know whether they start building it, because I haven't been since last February. But as far as I'm aware, they're going to redo the marina. I think there's an Israeli company that's spending millions on doing it, but they're doing what the Russians did in Limassol. Like Limassol's completely changed. They call it Little Moscow because it's full of Russians, So there's a lot of foreign investment out there. So yeah, you can get to Napa in half an hour. You can get to Limassol in half an hour if you want to go to bars. Bafo, if you like golf, you can go to Bafo, which is 45 minutes away, and see Bafo's academy because they've got a lovely training facility now. Henning Berg's head coach there. So there's a lot happening in Larnaca. Hey, listen, you might even bump into Jason Punchin because he plays for Arnothosi, which is a club in Larnaca. So yeah.
Happy days. What about what's the stadium like? What their fans got a good reputation? Are they well supported? Are they vocal?
Yeah. So the AEK Arena was built in 2016. They used to use an old stadium, the Gazizi, but that was decrepit. So they built this new stadium. Only holds 8,000. And the fans can be a little bit rowdy, but again, because it's a fairly new team, you're not going to get 3,000-4,000 ultras like you would with the bigger clubs. That being said, I know a lot of tickets are being sold. There's a lot of expats living in Cyprus, or British expats, and they're going to be wanting to go to watch the game. But their fans could be a little bit rowdy as well. I know there's a game this season between AEK and Salamina, and it did get a little bit naughty. A couple of journalists got beaten up as well. There've been stadium bans. Look, Cyprus is a fantastic island to go to, but when it comes to football, it does get a little bit too far. This season, we've had games cancelled because stadiums have been set on fire, Molotov cocktails thrown on the pitch, all sorts of stuff happening. So, look, it's a lovely place to go to, but just be very, very careful because the police out there don't tolerate much either. They can
No, quite. Yeah, so West Ham fans worth. Just being a bit on guard or whatever as they go out there. I think there was an extra allocation. I think initially it was only like 400 tickets. I think West Ham had available. I think that was increased.
Well, the thing is, usually in these big games they move the games to the Gazibi, which is the national stadium, which holds more supporters. So I thought they were going to move it there at the beginning because I thought, they can make more money out of it. But then again, it costs them more money for police, it costs them more money for security, so it wouldn't make any financial difference. It would make a big financial difference. So I think having it at the AEK Arena, which is a little stadium, the fans are going to be on top of the players as well. That's the other thing. So just be careful of bottles being thrown and all that as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, hopefully, so West Ham fans have had a bit of experience the last couple of seasons. Always been very well behaved, really. I've obviously been to a few of them, and they've all been really nice occasions. Just sort of enjoying being there, really. So hopefully more of the same on Thursday. So what we're talking then, Stel, style-wise, West Ham obviously coming off the back of two iffy results. Premier League form suffering somewhat. It's Aston Villa at home in the league on Sunday. So I think, to be honest, the Conference League is the last real thing of positivity that can come out of this season, and I think it will be huge for West Ham. I think we're one of the favourites to win the whole thing. I genuinely feel like we've got a good chance of doing that. I think David Moyes will play a slightly weakened team. However, what's been good under Moyes for the past few seasons is that our sort of second string B team side, if you like, isn't vastly different quality wise to the first choice 11 or whatever. So it's not like you're going to have a load of youngsters who are a completely different level. You're still going to have talented players. Pablo Fornals, Flynn Downs, Aaron Cresswell might get a sniff. Danny Ings is in and around the team still. Schumacher and Antonio. Hopefully Antonio doesn't play. I've already gone off on him about him on this podcast already. But no, do you know what I mean? What I'm getting at is that West Ham's second strength team is still a very, very full of very, very good, talented football players, and the difference isn't always huge. What can West Ham fans expect, or how do you expect the game to play out, sort of style-wise?
Well, AEK in Europe are different, a little bit different to what they are domestically in Cyprus. They've had a really, really good season. In all fairness, I mean, you're looking at a club that, let's have a look. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think they lost three. They lost 3 of their opening 8 games, but then they went on this unbeaten run of like 15 games where they won 13. But their recent form hasn't been great. They lost 2 and they lost 2, 1-1 at the weekend, and they drew 1 before that. But that's because of their Europa League form. And again, it goes back to what I said about the physicality and the demands of playing Thursday and Sunday. And the good thing about Cyprus is that they move games to suit the clubs that are in Europe, because it helps them out. But if you want to talk about Ajax playing style, I'm expecting, because if the first leg's at home, so I'm expecting them to play very similar to what they do in Cyprus against the big clubs. They'll try to hit teams on the counter-attack, but they're very good on transition, on turnover. They're wide players. They're their strongest weapons, so to speak, the 2 wide men. You've got Faraj, this right winger who signed from Muskron a couple of years ago. He's 24 years old. He reminds me of Riyad Mahrez. I'm not saying he's like Riyad Mahrez, but he reminds me of that, right foot, left foot. He's very tricky, skillful, loves to shoot from range, loves to create. Grushko on the left-hand side is a decent player, but I don't know if he's going to play because he's just recovered from injury. So there could be a change. I think Yakolis, who's on loan from Angers, might come in, Croatian midfielder. But then in the centre of the park, they've got so many quality players. I mean, you've got Mikel Gonzalez that played under David Moyes at Zaragoza. At Sociedad, in that year. But you got Angel Garcia, that was at Real Madrid. Rosales, that was at Malaga. Who else? Altman, who was in Fulham's youth squad, if I'm not mistaken. So they've got a lot of players, and I think in wide areas they could cause West Ham problems. Fullbacks getting forward. A lot of their goals this season have come from wide areas, be it crosses in the box. What AEK will do, they'll get the ball out wide and overload the box. They'll put 5 or 6 players in the box, which obviously leaves them open for a counter attack. But they're very aggressive in that respect. They've got Gus Ledders in the middle of the park that can pull strings, very good on the ball. So they can cause problems. But again, it's like I said at the top of the show, I don't know whether the stamina levels they'll be able to cope with West Ham, because obviously the Premier League level in terms of fitness is up there. In Cyprus, they're still. But as I said, these players have played top level football. Tomovic was at Spal in Italy, Milicevic was at Sarajevo. These players, they play for the national team as well. And you got Tchaikovsky, who Macedonian captain, 35 years old, but he's been around the block. So I think it'll be very easy to shoot AEK down and say, oh, they're just a team from Cyprus, but they're going to have a point to prove. A lot of these players, it could be their final chance to play against a big team, and then that's where the psychology comes in. And if David Moyes is on the ropes at the moment, it might be a good time to play him.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it's one of those things where I think he sees the Conference League as a bit of a relief. To be honest, it's a bit of a relief from the pressures of the domestic football at the moment, and that was certainly the feeling at the beginning of the season. Unbeaten, of course, in all of the group stage games, West Ham to get through to this stage of the competition, and I think he knows that the fans care about it. The fans care a lot. Yeah. West Ham fans would love more than anything. You know, the Europa League journey last season was so amazing. They'd love more than anything to get to a final, albeit it's considered Europe's tertiary competition, but to get to a final and potentially win it would be absolutely huge achievement. So there is.
Well, didn't Jose Mourinho win it last season? He got it tattooed on him. So
yeah, exactly.
If it means something to Jose, then
precisely that. Yeah, you know, that's Roma, and I think it's just easy. It's only really the big 6 clubs in England who sneer at these competitions. Manchester United fans do plenty of that, but all of a sudden the League Cup is also really important now. They've won it last year, so suits people's agenda. But from West Ham point of view, there's no shame whatsoever in really wanting to do well in this competition. So I think it will certainly be taken seriously. Stel, it's been absolutely brilliant having you join us on the podcast for the first time. What do you expect the score to be then Thursday night? And hopefully we'll get you on again before the second leg to have a little look back to this game, and we'll do some more of that stuff then. But what are you expecting the score?
I think it depends on what lineup you guys put out. You know, if he does go with the likes of Cresswell, who I think is susceptible to errors at left back when it comes to a tricky winger like Farage, will give him a few problems. But I think if you guys can handle deliveries in the box, be it from set pieces, crosses from wide areas, I think you'll be all right. Do you know what? Just for the sake of the Cypriot in me, I'm going to say 1-1. There you go. I'm going to sit right on the fence. Got splinters on my backside.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think as much as it'd be nice to win the game and put the tie to bed, I think West Ham fans would probably take a 1-1 away from home, confident in our ability to, you know, deliver at London Stadium. So fingers crossed. I don't think that'll be the worst result in the world. Stel, before we let you go, then tell us a little bit about This Is Mappa, your Cypriot football podcast.
Yeah, so we have a Cypriot football podcast. It's a weekly review show. We discuss the shenanigans around Cypriot football. I mentioned a few earlier. There's plenty more where that came from. Stadiums being set on fire, rival fans throwing chairs at each other, referees being attacked. But anyway, that's just the off the field antics.
Yeah.
We talk about the league results. We discuss news, and we're available on Twitter at This Is Mappa. Same with Instagram. And yeah, we interview former players as well, which is going pretty well. So yeah, touch wood, we can continue. And hopefully you guys can come on at some point. Maybe we could do a post-match review or something like that. I don't know.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Well, look, we'll be here if you fancy anything like that. West Ham fans, if you fancy hearing a bit more about Larnaca in particular, and Cypriot football in general, that is This Is Mappa. You're going to find that on all the usual podcast platforms. Listen, Stel, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on the show. Hopefully we can link up after the game and then ahead of the second leg, but enjoy it on Thursday.